This Confederate flag nonsense has got to stop. Seriously, within the past 2 weeks, our collective culture, our collective American lifestyle, whether it be on social media or maybe it's something that's been on the tongues on the streets, I really don't know because, let's face it, it's just whatever, has been all geared around the Confederate flag. It's actually to the point where last week, whenever same-sex marriages were made legal and the Confederate flag conspiracy or debate was raging, some people have actually said that the government was able to sneak the TPP, or the Trans-Pacific Partnership, into legality or into motion right underneath of our noses because we were too busy debating on these two issues, that it was meant to be a distraction, the old bait and switch. Well, obviously it worked, mainly because you idiots won't stop talking about it. And it's something where now TV Land decided to pull episodes of the Dukes of Hazzard based around the General Lee's representation of the Confederate flag on it. This has really got to end, and this has really got to stop. I'm not going to be able to stop it, but I'm at least going to tell you a couple things while you're here, while I have you. Quite frankly, just about every person that I've seen post about this has some amount of incorrect information. I've seen people say that the X represents their whole dissolution with the North, and this is in the Confederate flag, that the stars are representative of the 13 original colonies, or this or that. The stars are representative of the colonies that succeeded, first of all. And I've heard a lot of ideas about symbology. I've heard a lot of ideas about what it means to communities and what it means to this and blah, blah, blah. I'm going to start off with the group that has the most obvious reason to kind of dislike the Confederate flag, and those are African Americans, the folks that many, many years ago were subjected to slavery. And now many people believe that the reason why the Civil War occurred was over the concept of slavery. And I'll be the first one to tell you that there was a whole heck of a lot more going on in America than just that to actually fuel a war. Because if you think about it, if we had the same moxie, if we had the same amount of, I guess, aggressiveness that they had back in the 1800s, where something that simple would have caused a war, then we would have had probably about 5 more civil wars. One person would say that that's because we've become a little bit more civil toward one another as a nation. I would disagree and say we've actually just became more lazy. But yes, these individuals that their ancestors very well could have been slaves, there's a huge amount of symbology that this flag represents that's very representative of hatred, and I'm going to say right now that that's something that should be toned down and should be in the past. I'm not saying be tone deaf to it, because history is something that actually allows us to kind of study the past to avoid hopefully making the same mistakes in the future. But what the flag is actually more representative of is of the nation, is of the Confederacy, the Confederate States of America, which did not last all of that long. It was something that was established before the war broke out and did not last, obviously, considering the war was lost by the Confederacy. Second of all, it's something where we need to put that past collectively behind us as a culture, not just with one group, but as a culture, to actually heal the wounds that something like that caused. And I understand that this could be opening up some fresh wounds, whether it be from the streets of Ferguson, Missouri, either that or Baltimore, Maryland, where there still seems to be a lot of injustice and a lot of race battles that are going on. We need, as a collective culture, to stop profiling one another based around this. And start profiling individuals, or start talking about individuals, lumping individuals together based around their actions, not based around just what skin they had on their body whenever they were popped out of their mother's womb. But again, this is not that easy of an ideal, and there's still a lot of bias and a lot of hatred that exists, which I myself find silly. Some people may actually think it's warranted. Some people may even say that it's deserved. And while it is your American right to think that way, it's my American right to disagree with you. The second group of individuals are those that claim that This is part of my culture. This is part of my pride. I'm a proud rebel. Oh, you're a rebel. Oh, I see that. You're a rebel because you have a Confederate flag and you wear do-rags and you're from the South or whatever. If you want an actual rebel flag, if you want a flag that not only represents being a rebel, but represents being a rebel whose cause actually succeeded, and yeah, now I am going to take a little pot shot. Now I am going to take a little jab. If you want one that actually succeeded and actually represents rebellion, even though it's been tarnished ever since, look at the American flag. Look at the stars and bars. Look at the snake. Look at These Colors Won't Run. Look at the different banners that were used for this country in the past, which eventually led to the current banner, the current flag, the current cloth that represents this nation in the today. This is something where you need to understand that your personal upbringing, your personal roots are not founded on that flag just because you were born in the South. Congratulations. Does that mean that somebody who lives in Texas, even though Texas hasn't been an independent nation since right before the Civil War, should I say, does that mean that since they're native Texans, they should fly the Lone Star flag? I'm sure a lot of people do. There's no bad, connotation that's really given to that flag, as there seems to be with the Confederacy and the Confederate flag. But does this now mean that since we're going to get so overly sensitive and overly stupid about the Confederate flag, that now people are going to turn their attention toward Texas and tell them to take down the Lone Star flag? Because I can guarantee you one thing. If there's going to be anybody who has the actual moxie and the actual bravado, the cojones, so to speak, to decide that they don't want to be a part of this bull crap anymore, I look at Texas. Considering Texas was their own independent nation, they were able to get their own independence from Mexico, and then of course the Mexican-American War occurred and Texas was annexed into the U.S. But is that really where we are coming to as a society? I understand that this brings back some pretty bad feelings for a lot of people, and I understand that some people says that it gives them some pretty good feelings. It makes them feel really fine and dandy and happy, and it's part of their pride and heritage. This is something that happened 150 years ago. This is something where, as the president said, it does belong in a museum, but it should be something that should also be allowed in homes. It is something that should be allowed for the public, but it's something that needs to be flown with a modicum of respect. It's one that needs to be flown with a lot of respect attached to it, because there is still a lot of that negativity that surrounds it. But here's the wild and crazy idea, ladies and gentlemen. Up until 2 weeks ago, all of these ideas of hatred, all of these ideas of how it represents this or that or these or those and everything else was something that was recessed. It was something that was very low-key whenever it came to public opinion. It was something that was very, very diminished whenever it came to public accord. This is instead something that has elevated and maximized itself over the past couple of weeks because of a couple events that have taken place that have caused us to potentially rethink a lot of things. But these are decisions. These are results from that are occurring way too quickly and with a limited amount of thought, and they're affecting things that do not matter, ladies and gentlemen. TV land pulling the Dukes of Hazzard because the Confederate flag is on the General Lee. Well, first of all, it's called the General Lee. General Lee, of course, was the general of the Confederacy, one of them. And the Confederate flag, the Confederacy, it's based in the South. I have not seen very many episodes of the Dukes of Hazzard, but I know enough about this show to really understand that this is not hurting anybody. This is not hurting anybody in the slightest. This is not even something that is remotely even attempting to be attached to the show, aside from the fact that there are a couple of rebel boys that are having a pretty good time and have a pretty hot chick to go along with them. Jessica Simpson played her in the movie. So where do we go from here? And that's where it gets, honestly, a little bit scary. it really does get scary, because we are in a nation where if one thing happens, it starts to ask the questions of what about this, what about that? Since the Confederate flag is no longer tolerated, the Lone Star flag of Texas, is that no longer tolerated? What about state flags? Maybe state flags represent hatred. Maybe if I leave Pennsylvania, where I'm at right now, and move to Wyoming or something like that, I'm going to demand that the Pennsylvania flag be taken down because it gave me bad dreams about being poor or being oppressed, or the freaking Amish scare the shit out of me. Is that where we're going to go? Is that where we're going to go, where if just enough people seem to have a little bellyaching problem about something, it's actually going to cause those people who actually do things for this country, who actually make decisions, are going to notice to initiate this idea that democracy is still alive and well? And finally, and most importantly, if you think that these two ideas, the legalization of same-sex marriage and the Confederate flag debate, was initially and intentionally put into the public eye, infected into their mindsets to allow the TPP to pass. It's kind of funny how there was no talk about the TPP, at least not very much, until after this happened. And then all of a sudden, it seems like everybody knows about the TPP and everybody's an expert about it. Obviously, you are not an expert, considering you can't learn very much in just 24 hours. And obviously, for those of you who have broken that story and who talked about that story, you knew about it beforehand. So this was not a bait and switch, unlike some other things that we have seen in American history, recent American history. This was not something that was implemented just for that to get going. This is, at its core, ladies and gentlemen, about a piece of cloth that has obviously garnered a reputation based around which groups have used it, based around what individuals have backed it, and based around what numbers and numbers upon people have said about it and say that it represents the symbology, really, over the course of roughly 150 years. But above all else, this is something that should be flown just as a symbol of the past. The symbol of the Confederate States of America, which was a country for a short period of time, even had its own currency, had its own government, had its own president in Jefferson Davis. But that part of history is now done. That part of history is now gone. And if you're looking at me upset about this, saying, well, what do you know? Where are you from? The North? The South? You just said you're from Pennsylvania, so you're obviously from the North, you Yankee scum. You're part of the problem, actually. You're actually part of the problem. We live in a society that is so inclined to separate that it is absurd. It is absurd. One of the hugest problems that we have right now. We separate black and white, we separate gay from straight, we separate north from south. It's a flag. Put the damn thing in a museum. If you have one, put it in your home. Hell, put it right next to the portrait of Robert E. Lee that you probably have, with Jefferson Davis to the left or to the right. Maybe Stonewall Jackson is somewhere in your home as well. Make a shrine. That's fine. Do whatever you want. But this is over. The Confederacy is dead. It's been dead for 150 years. The South will not rise again. It'll be postponed every year until the end of time, or until the people in this country grow some balls. And finally, and most importantly, the representation, the symbology behind it and everything like that. It's been 150 years for that to really recede. 150 years for that to really subside. Maybe the real reason why it hasn't receded and hasn't subsided is because the people that still don this flag and the people that still fly this flag, the people that still claim this to be a portion of their character, refuse to actually change a little bit themselves. But the same could also be true with those who are taking the symbology too far. That they refuse to see past that. And for the rest of us out there, myself included, that have an opinion, and that's all, that it's not something that affects us, that's not something that's this or that, shut up. You're already so convinced that this was used as a bait and switch to get something passed. Well, then stop talking about it. Stop talking about it. I never thought I would see so much be made over cloth. That's all I got.